Hello everyone, it is Kaiju Stuff here, and I'm back with another review. Today, we're reviewing this. This is a limited edition Godziburst set. I really don't know too much about the line, and more specifically, I don't know a lot about this set, but I do know it is an exclusive of some kind. But this is my first ever Godziburst set, or just figures in general. Once again, I have no idea. But I recently did just order the Machine Gun Gigan, which I am so thankful they created, because that has really been a personal wish for me. Literally, my whole life. The Machine Gun Gigan figure, that I thought that would never exist. At this point, collecting Godzillas is not even a surprise anymore because of all the crazy stuff they come out with. So, without further ado, I'm going to jump right in and I'm going to start with the box. Starting with the front of the box, the whole front has a really nice window so you can see all the nice figures in it. On the bottom left, they have like an ice Mothra and a red Kiru. On the bottom right, you have a very generic Godzilla and a nacho cheese Hedora. Not sure if they're actually called that, but that's what I'm calling them for the rest of the video. And of course, the signature Bandai sign. And I do believe this is the only set of figures, or any form of anything in my collection, that is made in Vietnam. On the top of the box has a nice gold shimmer weird thing, cloud, I guess, with all the figures that are available, including the Machine Gun Gigan that I just ordered. On the top left has Godziburst, and on the top right has the Godzilla symbol, Bandai Namco, the other Godzilla symbol, and Japanese text that I don't know how to read. On this side of the box, you have really beautiful art of the Kiru and Mothra figures. And yes, these do look like pictures, but no, they are art. Same goes for this side with Godzilla and Nacho Cheese Hedora. I also just noticed that this Godzilla is specifically Godzilla 1991. Going to the back of the box here, and one thing that I've known for quite a long time with the Godziburst line is that they kind of like to divide the Godzilla characters into elements, quite like Pokemon. So I guess Hedora's element is not nacho cheese. I guess it's lava, space, and not pita. With Kiryu's, it's, I'm assuming, ice and not pita once again. And Godzilla's element is obviously Godzilla. Ice Mothra here is ice and tree element. Very interesting. And the top of this box has the same old figures lined up in a really cool Power Ranger-like way. And it's telling me not to eat it on the bottom of the box. Also, 3-year-olds should not play with this. Well, good thing I'm not 3. Let's get this thing open. Before getting to the actual figures, this is the background that was inside the box. I figure I would mention it here. It just kind of looks like one of those spray paint things that guy makes with the moon on the YouTube. No one knows what I'm talking about. That's fine. I didn't want you to. Alright, let's get to these figures. Now, the first figure we're going to look at is, in my opinion, the obvious, most boring option, and that is Godzilla, because it's just straight up Godzilla. His element was Godzilla. Yeah. Anyway, let's get to the paint. For the paint, most of his body's a nice gray color. For the dorsal plates, he's got a nice platinum blue color, which I find to be very nice. His mouth was also given the exact same treatment, which, once again, I like the color variation. His nails are a really nice bone white thing. I would say it's more of a tan, actually. And the eyes are the same color as the nails, just with a black pupil. Now, one thing I really like about this line is the fact that they're nice and tiny, but they still have ball joints, which I find to be very cool and I think very niche in the figure realm. Most figures that are relatively big have ball joints, and the tiny ones really don't move at all, but these ones have really decent articulation for being so tiny. For example, the legs are on a nice ball joint, so they can really go wherever they want. That also goes for the hips. The arms are not on a ball joint, so they just move up and down very nicely. That also goes for the head. And finally, the tail can rotate quite nicely. Overall, this style of figure is a really untapped niche in the collecting realm, and it really does remind me of these figures also made by Bandai, which I'm pretty sure was the point, and if it wasn't, then that's a sheer coincidence, because these are basically exact, it's just this one's smaller and has less articulation, simply because it's smaller. Overall, though, I really do like it. I will say, though, Godzilla's dorsal plates are really dinky, which, it's just a little nitpick. It really does not matter to me. On to the next figure. Now, from the most boring, in my opinion, to the second most boring, in my opinion. And if it's not your opinion, well, it's my video. And this is not your video. Anyways, here's Mothra. Or Ice Mothra. Which is basically like, I would assume this is trying to be Burning Godzilla in some regard, in which that it's essentially just an element version of a monster. But I'm really into that whole switching a monster up slightly due to something that has to do with something. So I think this is really cool that they made an Ice Mothra. Because there's already a Water Mothra and a Green Mothra, which I don't have either of which. So I think this is really neat. It has really nice detail on the wings, and it just kind of reminds me of Frozen, which I would assume is the point. But it just looks a lot more wavy than a regular Mothra. Like, it looks watery. Like melting ice, which I'm assuming is not what it's supposed to look like, because then that means Mothra is dying. And I do like how the detail is on both sides of the wing, because usually toys get that very wrong. The plastic this is made from is very nice. It's translucent, and it really does convey what ice looks like. I also thought I would mention that while recording this, my area got about a foot of ice. And I'm saying ice because it was snow and then it turned into ice. And it's very cartoony when you stand on it, because you don't sink, you just stand on it. So, I find it pretty neat that I'm reviewing an Ice Mothra while there's currently a foot of ice outside. Oh, also, it's weird how there's like a peg on the bottom of Mothra, like it's supposed to come with like a stand to make her look like she's flying, because it didn't come with that. So that's kind of a shame, but what are you gonna do? I like how the eyes have like a texture like a bug eye. I know that was very descriptive, but you get my point looking at this. It's also a nice pink color, with the antennas being blue. And for the articulation, there is none, which is totally fine. I could get by that, considering it's a relatively tiny Mothra figure, which Mothra figures don't usually have articulation anyway. So this being tiny gives it an even better reason to not have any. On to the next figure, which this is when stuff starts to get really interesting, I feel. Now on to Nacho Cheese Hedora, aka Lava Hedora, aka Nacho Cheese Hedora. Which I think is definitely one of the most unique ones, just because it's Hedora. And all the other characters I feel are a lot more well known, and this one's relatively obscure when it comes to just day-to-day people. Hedora's paint is very nice. It definitely just does remind me of nacho cheese. And when you first saw it, you definitely thought it was nacho cheese. Don't lie to me. Everything that drips off is very light yellow. The feet look like a ground beef, something you would find in a nacho dip. And overall, just a lot of bright yellow highlights, but most of it being translucent red and orange. The entire head, though, is a bright yellow with black eyes and blue irises for some reason, which I think gives a nice color gradient. For the articulation, the arms move just about like that. The tail does not move, and when it came out of the box, this is one of the only things I actually had to put on myself. And the head could do a full 360-degree spin. And this is one out of 2 figures that came with an accessory. This being a little flying Hedora, and this is my second ever in the collection. It also says Toho Co. on the bottom. It's a nice translucent orange, and it has a little weird hole made for Hedora's armpit for whatever reason. And after putting it on, I mean, it's good for storage, but it looks like Hedora fell in a lake and contracted a leech. It's really weird looking because it has some weird texture on the side. It looks like a leech to me. But it's good for storage, and you won't notice it if it's just on a shelf. So that's Hedora, and I think it was a really nice detail to add this little flying guy, and it is weird actually how little he is. He is really tiny, but it's cool. It's my second ever flying Hedora, and he just so happens to be a nacho cheese version. And I bet you someone watching this is not going to like how I keep referring to this as nacho cheese Hedora, but you will not stop me. Anyway, let's move on to Kiru. Now, the Kiru in this set is hands down my favorite in the set, due to it being what appears to be a burning Kiru, which is a first for Kiru, and it is really cool just to have a tiny little well-articulated Kiru that's red. Let's move on to the paint. Now, my favorite part about this figure is that they have little flame emblems all throughout his body. I should also probably mention here that his entire body is a really nice, bright red color, with some blacks in the thigh and some gunmetal gray throughout the whole body. My favorite little detail is that little F for flame, I'm assuming, on his chest. I think that's really neat. His eyes are also a nice baby blue. And his whole backpack thing is a gunmetal gray, with some dark blues and light blues mixed in. For the articulation, he's got a ball joint on the hips once again, but it moves a lot better than Godzilla. The arms, once again, go up and down very nicely. If you take his little backpack thing off, the entire head spins very, very nicely, nice and smooth. The tail also spins very, very nicely. The legs move so well on Kiru, you could have him run in a very comedic fashion. Now, before ending Kiru's review, I would like to address something. That is way too easy to just come off, and the whole time I was moving him around for the review, I actually had to hold that on, simply because it is so hard to just keep it on. It's also really weird how Kiru's dorsal plates look without that thing. So, in my brain, Kiru is just like a balding guy wearing a hat. Look at this. What is this? This is not Kiru. This is a red giraffe with guns. Look how much better that looks. Look how much better it looks. They couldn't have done something to where, if it's removed, it looks as good. I will say, though, I do like how you can remove it, because this is the only figure of Kiru that I could just remove this thing. So now that we're done with the main reviews, it is on to the comparisons. Each figure will have 2 comparisons to compare with. Starting with Godzilla, I'm going to compare him with the Godzilla -1 Bandai Namco Godzilla, because I have to assume that at least one of them is based off each other, just because they've essentially the same plastic, they are painted with the same quality, they're just the same company, they're very similar, and the only difference I can see is that this one's just smaller. So, I think it's a good comparison, and I basically already compared Godzilla with the 2004 figure, so I figure, hey, that's a pun. I figure I might as well compare it to this one as well. The other comparison I would compare this to is probably the little Bandai Creation Chibi Godzilla, because these are very common figures, and I thought that this would be a nice reference for scale. So, they're a little bit bigger, but overall, they're really not that big. They're roughly 2.5, 3 inches, and they're very neat. I'm, of course, talking about the Godziburst, not the Chibi Godzilla. I wouldn't be reviewing Chibi Godzillas. That's old news. But if it's so old, then I'll review it. But it's not old enough to be that old news. Anyway, on to the next figure, Mothra. For Mothra's first comparison, I figure, that's another joke, I figure I will compare it to this little Japanese Mothra that I know absolutely nothing about, because it was free from an eBay order. So it just came with the eBay order. But I thought I would compare a tiny Mothra with an even tinier Mothra. And also I just wanted to show this little thing off. Isn't it neat? Pretty neat. But yeah, it's like they're both a Mothra, but this one's green. On to the next comparison. My second comparison for Mothra is the Trendmasters 6-inch scale Mothra. I figure I would compare Mothra to Mothra once again. And also I just wanted to show off my Mothra from Trendmasters. It doesn't work. I never bother getting batteries, but they're basically not to scale whatsoever. But I figure I have to stop making that joke. I'm not funny. Anywho, so that's Mothra. Compared to Mothra. Again. Onto Hedora. For Hedora, I chose the Gashapon Hedora, which I lost the tail a while back, but they're relatively close to scale, and I even feel like I can get Hedora in the exact same position. Yeah. So now we have 2 Hedoras. And if you watch the series, you'll know that this is Hedora's son-ish, child, offspring. I think offspring's a better term. But yeah, very nice. They look very nice together. It shows how drastically different this one is compared to a regular, average Joe Hedora. And for my second comparison with the Nacho Cheese Hedora, I chose the X Plus 32cm landing stage Hedora. I chose this specifically because of how large it is and how small this one is, and I thought it would be a nice size comparison. So if one of you have one of these, you can really see how tiny or large each one of them are. This is by far the largest Hedora in my collection, by a long shot. I don't have too many Hedoras. It's not like I'm that much of a Hedora fan. Hedora's alright. He's a pile of crap, literally. Unless you're talking about this one, because this one's a pile of cheese. So, yeah, that's a nice comparison, and I thought I would throw him in. Now, this is actually my third Kiru that's a really odd color that's not just silver. So, I'm going to compare it to the other two. Starting with the Evangelion 6-inch Kiru, which is definitely one of my favorite Kirus. And to be honest, basically every Kiru is one of my favorite figures in my collection. Kiru is just such a marketable character just by how he looks. He's just really cool. And that's one of the reasons why he's basically the main character that's not Godzilla in the series. And that's why he's not Mechagodzilla. So, Kiryu's just really one of my favorite characters, and definitely Kaiju Stuff 2's favorite character by a long shot. But, yeah, they're both odd colors, and they're pretty neat. And for my second comparison, I chose the 8-inch black Kiryu made by Bandai. And I just figured I might as well show this one off because it's also a weird color that's not just silver and blue. So I thought that all these Kiryus were just very unique, and I had to show them off next to this Kiryu because this Kiryu is very unique, and I'm sure one day I'm going to get an even weirder Kiryu, and I'm going to be comparing it to this one. So that's all my Kiryus that are weird. And the final figure we're going to be comparing today with another figure or two is this. Now, by definition, this is a figure because it is its own character. And yes, it does technically come with Hedora, but quiet. This is not an accessory. This is its own being. So let's compare it. Now, for the first comparison for this almighty figure is this. This is the Mezco 5-point articulation flying Hedora. And I thought it was only fitting considering these are the only two flying Hedoras in my collection. And to be honest, might be the only ones in my collection ever, unless something else happens, which I'm sure there will be something else that will happen. But for a very long time, I'm assuming these are the only two, and they look pretty much identical if you exclude the color, the type of plastic, and the size. So it's just basically just the same shape. Pretty cool. And the last thing I want to compare this to is my dog. Now, if you see, my dog is about 65 centimeters. Very nice detail. Good paint job. I just thought this would really bring it to scale. Really how tiny this little Hedora is. And I just thought it would be very nice to include my dog. So, with that, guys, thank you for watching. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. It really helps. It really helps specifically. My dog just hit the camera. It really helps specifically this little guy. Look how cute he is. Isn't he cute? Right, Rosie? Isn't he cute? Yeah. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe. And goodbye.